You wake up in a cold, dirty hut, hungry because there's barely any food. You step outside, and the first thing you see is a dead body being dragged away. This was the Dark Ages, and you probably wouldn't last a day here. So let's say you're born in that period. Congrats, you're already off to a bad start. Newborn deaths are through the roof, and even a simple fever could wipe you out. There are no vaccines, no proper medicine, and if you get sick, the best treatment you'll get is someone rubbing crushed herbs on your forehead. But if that doesn't work, well, it was nice knowing you. But let's assume you survive. From the moment you can walk, you're put to work. There's no school for most people, so instead of learning how to read, you're out in the fields helping your family farm. It's exhausting. Your hands are covered in blisters, and if you slack off, you'll probably get a beating. But you know what's not exhausting? Clicking the subscribe button. It only takes you 2 seconds. Anyways, as you get older, things don't get much better. You live in a tiny cold hut made out of wood and mud, packed in with your entire family. Privacy doesn't exist. The air inside is thick with smoke from the fire, and everything smells terrible because no one bathes regularly. People believe washing too often makes you sick, so the stink is just something that you have to get used to. And if you're born during a war, well, things get even worse. Armies can show up out of nowhere, burn down villages, steal whatever food is left, and force people to fight. Even if you manage to survive the mess, you still have to deal with harsh winters, famines, and deadly diseases. No matter what, something is always trying to kill you. But let's say you dodge diseases, starvation, and backbreaking labor. There's still one big problem. Your lord. Yeah, you don't really own anything. The land you farm? His. The food you grow? Mostly his. Your time? Definitely his. You're basically stuck working for him because that's just how the system works. If he demands higher taxes, you pay up. If he calls you to fight in some war you don't care about, you grab a rusty weapon and hope for the best. Saying no isn't an option, unless you enjoy the idea of being punished. Or worse. And speaking of punishment, justice in the Dark Ages is literally wild. There's no proper police force, so if someone accuses you of stealing, lying, or even looking at someone funny, you might have to prove your innocence with something called trial by ordeal. That could mean walking over hot coals, holding a red-hot iron bar, or being thrown into a river. If you sink, congratulations, you're innocent, but also probably dead. If you float, you're guilty and might be executed anyway. Fair system, right? Then there's the never-ending fear of war. If you're a peasant, you have no say in what happens. One day you're farming in peace, the next, knights on horseback come storming through, setting everything on fire. If your village is unlucky, you might be dragged off as a prisoner, forced to work somewhere, or even worse, straight up executed for being in the way. But let's say that you somehow manage to avoid all that. Maybe you make it to adulthood, start a family, and try to settle down. Bad news is, you're not gonna live long. Most people don't live past 40, and even if you do, you'll be dealing with rotting teeth, constant joint pain, and illnesses that no one knows how to treat. Your doctor, if you can even afford one, might suggest bloodletting, aka cutting you open and draining some blood to quote-unquote balance your humors. But spoiler, this doesn't really do anything at all. It only makes things even worse. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, but what if I was born into a rich family? Well, sure, being a noble is better than being a peasant. You get more food, warmer clothes, and people do the hard work for you. But it's not exactly a dream life either. You're constantly at risk of being poisoned, betrayed, or forced into a marriage for political reasons. If you're a nobleman, you're expected to fight in wars. And if you're a noble woman, your main job is having kids. Lots of them. Because chances are, not all will survive. Life in the Dark Ages was a never-ending grind, and the odds were stacked against you from the moment you were born. Hygiene was practically non-existent. You'd be lucky to get a bath more than a couple times a year, and when you did, it was probably in a filthy public bathhouse where hundreds of other people have already soaked in the same dirty water. Soap didn't exist, and your best bet for cleaning up was rubbing yourself with some herbs or a bit of ash to hopefully get rid of worst of the stink. Most of the time, you'll just walk around smelling like sweat, mud, and animals. After all, no one else is bathing either, so it kinda became normal. But then someone from another village would come around and you'd realize you might actually smell really bad. And your diet wasn't any better. As a peasant, you mostly eat leftovers, and not the tasty kind. Stale bread, old vegetables, and maybe a small piece of meat if you were lucky. You didn't have the luxury of refrigeration, so the food was often fermented or already rotting. On rare occasions, you might get a bowl of soup, if you can call it that. It was basically water with a few scraps floating in it, maybe a couple of bones with some meat left on them. But even your leftovers weren't safe. The rats loved your food just as much as you did, and sometimes they get to it first. You'll go back for another bite, only to find that a rat had taken a chunk out of your bread or jumped right in your stew. Jail was another thing that really sucked. If you broke some rules, whether it was stealing food because you were starving or speaking out against the Lord, you were probably going to end up in one of the prison cells. And let me tell you, it was a nightmare. The food in jail wasn't food at all. It was just rice. Rice. And that's if you're lucky. It was probably moldy with strands of hair mixed in, and sometimes you'll find bugs crawling in it. If the guards were feeling generous, you might get a bowl of soup, but it wasn't much better. The soup was more like a stinky, watery broth that no one, including the rats, really wanted to eat. In fact, the rats would run away from it because the smell was so awful. But they wouldn't run from you. They were your roommates now. Rats, not much different than you, living off of what scraps were left. They crawl over you at night, nibbling on your feet while you tried to sleep. Sometimes they'll even nibble on your clothes if you were lucky enough to fall asleep long enough. And if you had long hair, don't be surprised if you woke up to a rat chewing on your scalp because your hair also smelled like food to them. You shared everything with them. They ate with you, slept with you, and even played with you, but they didn't exactly play nice. And the jail guards? They weren't much better. They didn't care whether you were guilty or not. If you were thrown in, it was pretty much guaranteed that you'd be treated like trash. They might whip you, leave you chained up in a cold, dark cell for days without food or water, or lock you up in the stocks for public humiliation. If you were lucky enough to escape the stocks, you still have to deal with random beatings, with the guards making sure that you stayed in line. Jail wasn't about punishment for crimes. It was about punishment for existing. And if you somehow managed to escape the horrors of prison, things weren't much better in the rest of your life. Your daily existence was a struggle from start to finish. You woke up, worked the land, ate whatever scraps you could, and fell into bed, only to wake up the next day and do it all over again. There were no stores to run to if you ran out of food. If the harvest failed, that was it. You had nothing. You'd be stuck scavenging for anything you could find, or begging for scraps, hoping that someone would throw you a bone. If you were unlucky enough to live in a village that was invaded, your life could get a whole lot worse. The invaders would burn your house, steal your crops, and maybe even drag you off to work in a distant land. Or worse, they'll just kill you on the spot. On top of everything else, disease was a constant threat. Sickness was everywhere, and people had no idea what caused it. Washing your hands or keeping clean to avoid getting sick wasn't a thing. If you got sick, you probably just die. Or if you were lucky, a healer might give you some old herbs and hope that they helped. If you got a fever, you sweat through the night with no way to cool down. And if you got an infection, you most likely die from it within a few days. There were no real doctors, no medicine, and no way to cure diseases. It was a miracle if you made it past 40. Now, let's say you somehow survived all that and made it past 40. You might think that things might get better, right? But that's not how it worked. In the Dark Ages, your marriage wasn't about love. It was about survival and property. Your parents would probably arrange it, and you'd marry someone who might be much older than you, or someone you didn't even like. If you're a noble, it wasn't any better. Your marriage was just another way to make alliances and gain more land. Whether you liked it or not, you had kids. Lots of them. No matter where you were in society, the Dark Ages was one long, brutal struggle. Whether you were a peasant, a noble, or a prisoner, the chances of you making it through without facing some sort of pain, hunger, or death were slim to none. The whole period was a time of misery, and survival was all that mattered. If you somehow managed to get by, it wasn't a victory. It was just the slowest, most painful game of endurance ever. You wouldn't survive, and if you did, you wouldn't want to. But let me know in the comments, would you survive the Dark Ages? Or is there an era even worse than this? To find out, check out this other video I made. And don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, I might end up living like it's the Dark Ages for real. I mean, hey, I got kids to feed.